The Sunday dinner table felt warm and safe, at least that's what I told myself. The smell of roast chicken, the clinking of glasses, the easy chatter bouncing across the table. On the surface, it looked like any ordinary family meal in suburban America. But beneath the laughter, a storm was waiting. I thought my empire was untouchable, built on hard work, endless nights, and a confidence that had carried me through boardrooms, contracts, and more broken deals than I care to admit. To everyone around me, I was the successful one, the one who made it, the son who turned family shame into family pride. But then Dad spoke, just 3 words. "Can I help?" Cut through the noise like a blade. The chatter stopped. Forks froze halfway to mouths, and suddenly, the dinner table didn't feel so warm anymore. The taste of comfort turned bitter in seconds. Here's the thing about power. It feels solid, like concrete, until someone kicks the right crack. My father wasn't shouting, wasn't accusing. He was smiling like he'd just offered me a blessing. But the silence that followed? That was the sound of walls collapsing, because his help wasn't help at all. It was the blow that ended my reign. And if you're wondering how a man who worked his way from nothing, sleeping in his car, hustling side gigs, clawing his way into respectability, could lose it all in one family dinner, well, buckle up. Because this isn't just a story about money, business, or power. It's a story about pride, secrets, and the thin line between success and exposure. Before the fall, before the silence, before the knife hidden inside my father's smile. There was a beginning, and like most beginnings, mine didn't start with a grand plan or $1 million idea. It started with failure, with shame, with the kind of setbacks that make people whisper when you walk into a room, but don't get it twisted. This isn't a pity story. It's a comeback story. You're about to see how a man who looked like he had it all ended up stripped down in front of the very people he wanted to impress the most, and how that moment didn't destroy him. It rebuilt him. So lean in, because the story's just getting started. Welcome, story lovers. From where are you watching? Drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far our story travels. Before there was the Sunday dinner. Before the laughter, the roast chicken, and my father's smile that turned into a dagger, there was a boy who believed he could outrun his past. I wasn't born with an empire. I was born with a burden. My family lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, where the walls were thin enough to hear arguments next door, and the smell of fried food lingered in the hallways for days. We didn't have much, but we had pride, or at least my father did. He wore his dignity like armor, no matter how heavy the bills got. My mother stretched every dollar until it tore. She could make a bag of rice last a week and turn hand-me-downs into something that almost looked new. From the beginning, I was told I would be the one who would break the cycle, who would carry the family name into boardrooms instead of back alleys. That kind of pressure doesn't just sit on your shoulders. It seeps into your bones. School was my escape. While other kids were playing ball in the yard, I was buried in books. Not because I was a genius, but because I was desperate. Desperate to climb out. Teachers noticed. Scholarships followed. For a moment, it seemed like the prophecy might be true. I really was going to be the one. College felt like stepping into another world. Students with last names that opened doors sat beside me, treating internships like hobbies. I treated every exam like war. My dream wasn't fame or even money, it was freedom. Freedom from eviction notices. Freedom from shame. Freedom from hearing my parents whisper at night about what bill they could push off another week. But dreams have a cruel way of testing you. The first crack came when my mother got sick. Nothing catastrophic at first, just doctor visits and medications that insurance didn't cover. But in a family already on the edge, not catastrophic is still a landslide. I picked up a job on campus, then another off campus. Sleep became optional. My GPA slipped. And with it, the scholarships that had been my golden ticket began to disappear. Then came the betrayal. A business partner in a small side hustle I had started, a kid I thought was a friend, ran off with every cent we'd scraped together. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but to me, it was everything. Rent money, tuition, my shot at staying afloat. I remember staring at the empty account on my phone, my heart pounding like it was trying to break out of my chest. That night I slept in my car for the first time. It wouldn't be the last. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It teaches you tricks. Tricks to survive. I learned how to make gas last 3 days longer than it should. How to charm professors into giving me extensions I hadn't earned. How to eat on $10 a week. Beans, ramen, and whatever free pizza student groups were handing out. And yet, I didn't quit. Every morning, I ironed my one good shirt in the dorm laundry room, put on my best face, and told the world I was fine. Pride doesn't just run in my family, it chains us. Asking for help felt worse than hunger. The sacrifices piled up. I skipped birthdays. I skipped meals. I skipped sleep. But I never skipped ambition. Because even when everything was falling apart, I could see it, the faint glimmer of something more. I remember sitting in the library one night, staring at an economics textbook I could barely keep open because my hands were shaking from exhaustion. Around me, kids yawned and complained about finals like it was the end of the world. And I thought, if only they knew. If only they knew what it meant to fight not for grades, but for survival. And yet, in those moments, I found a strange kind of strength. Survival sharpens you. It strips away illusions. It forces you to confront who you are when there's nothing left to lean on. I wasn't just chasing a degree anymore. I was chasing redemption. For my parents. For every unpaid bill. For the nights, my mother cried quietly in the kitchen so no one would hear. For my father, who worked jobs that broke his back but refused to break his pride. That's what kept me moving. That's why I refused to quit. But let's be clear, it wasn't glamorous. I didn't rise like a phoenix. I crawled, clawed, stumbled, and sometimes just laid there, praying the world would forget I existed. And yet, every small act of survival became a brick in the empire I swore I'd build one day. The irony? That empire would eventually bring me back to the same dinner table, facing the same father whose pride had shaped me. And in that moment, the cracks from my past would widen into an earthquake. Because the truth is, empires aren't destroyed in boardrooms. They're destroyed at the dinner table with family watching. Every story of survival has that one moment, the fork in the road where everything changes. For me, that moment didn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It came quietly, disguised as opportunity. I was still clawing my way through the wreckage of my past, patching together jobs, chasing grades, and fighting exhaustion. That's when I met him, Marcus Kane. Marcus wasn't like the professors I'd known or the employers who treated me as disposable. He was sharp, polished, and intimidatingly successful. The kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone adjust their posture. But for some reason, he noticed me. It started with a presentation in one of my classes. I had been half dead from an overnight shift, running on caffeine fumes and adrenaline. Still, when I started explaining economic models and how they applied to real-world markets, Marcus, who had come in as a guest speaker, leaned forward. He didn't just nod politely like the others. He studied me, his eyes narrowing as if he had just uncovered a rare gem. After class, he pulled me aside. "You ever thought about consulting?" he asked casually, as if he hadn't just thrown open a door I didn't even know existed. That question became my lifeline. Within weeks, I was working part-time for his small but ambitious firm. It wasn't glamorous. I was crunching numbers, writing drafts no one would read with my name on them, and doing the kind of grunt work others avoided. But it was different. It was a seat at the table, even if it was the kids' table in the corner. And for the first time, hope felt real. But here's the thing about opportunity. It always comes with shadows. At the firm, I met Claire. She was Marcus's right hand, brilliant, efficient, and fiercely protective of her position. From day one, she treated me not as a colleague, but as a threat. The kind of rival who smiled in meetings but sharpened knives in the hallway. Her whispers about me reached my ears through the office grapevine. "He's too ambitious. He doesn't know his place. He's not one of us." She wasn't entirely wrong. I wasn't one of them. I didn't come from money. I didn't have family connections. I had hunger, desperation, and the audacity to believe I belonged. That audacity carried risks, big ones. One night, while staying late at the office, I stumbled across something I wasn't supposed to see. Marcus had left his office door cracked open, papers scattered across the desk. Among them was a contract draft. one that outlined numbers that didn't match the spreadsheets I'd been working on. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a typo. But the more I read, the colder my blood ran. The numbers weren't just off, they were deliberately altered. Revenues inflated, losses buried, the kind of creative accounting that could tank a company if it ever came to light. I froze. My entire career, my fragile shot at freedom, was now balanced on a knife's edge. Do I pretend I never saw it? Or do I risk everything to speak up? That night I barely slept. I kept replaying the choice in my head. On one side, silence. The same silence that had chained my family for generations. On the other, truth, the kind that could destroy not only Marcus, but me as well. And then there was Claire. She had been watching me like a hawk for weeks, waiting for me to slip. If she caught wind that I knew something, she'd bury me before I had the chance to move. But deep down, I knew silence wasn't an option. I had crawled through too much dirt to build something honest, something real. If I let this go, what kind of empire would I be building? One built on lies? One that could collapse with a single gust of wind? So I made a choice. I started gathering proof quietly, saving copies of spreadsheets, writing notes late at night when no one was around. I didn't tell a soul, not even my closest friends. The fewer people who knew, the safer it was. But secrets have weight, and carrying them takes its toll. Every meeting, every casual conversation with Marcus, every sideways glance from Claire, it all felt like walking a tightrope above fire. And then something happened that pushed the stakes even higher. Marcus began grooming me more openly, praising my work in front of others, giving me projects that should have gone to Claire. The shift was obvious, and she didn't hide her fury. I could feel her resentment radiating across the room like heat. She wanted me gone, and she would stop at nothing to make it happen. Meanwhile, the proof I had been collecting grew into something undeniable. Patterns of manipulation, contracts designed to deceive, numbers that told a story Marcus didn't want told. I knew I was sitting on a bomb. The question was when and how to let it explode, and that's when the real test began. Because opportunity isn't just about rising, it's about risk. And the higher you climb, the harder the fall. I was no longer just a desperate kid chasing survival. I was a man standing at the edge of something massive, something that could either launch me into the future I'd dreamed of or destroy me before I ever got the chance. Could already hear my father's voice in my head, echoing like a warning. Pride builds quickly. But truth? Truth lasts. The irony? The same father whose words shaped me would later use them as the weapon that brought my empire crashing down. But we're not there yet. First came the rise, the dangerous, exhilarating rise that made the fall possible. The boardroom smelled of fresh coffee and arrogance. Men in tailored suits leaned back in leather chairs, trading smirks as if the whole world bent to their balance sheets. At the head of the table sat Mr. Harlan, the CEO, his gold watch catching the light every time he tapped the table impatiently. They weren't expecting her, at least not like this. "Excuse me," the CFO barked when Ruth slipped in, her mop bucket nowhere in sight. Instead, she clutched a plain envelope. His tone dripped with disdain. "This is a closed meeting." Ruth didn't flinch. She had flinched too many times in her life, at eviction notices, at collection calls, at doctors whispering survival odds about her son. "Not anymore. You might want to open it," she said, placing the envelope dead center on the polished table. Her voice was steady, but her hands tingled like live wires. The CFO scoffed, but curiosity won. He slid out the papers. His face drained of color with every line his eyes scanned. Adjusted totals, off-balance accounts, shell companies tucked away like dirty laundry. "This is nonsense," he stammered, looking to Harlan for backup. But Ruth wasn't finished. She reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled napkin. The same napkin she had scribbled on at 3 a.m. under the glow of a single lamp while her son slept beside her. "Numbers, dates, discrepancies, proof. This," Ruth said, tapping the napkin, "it's your missing $4.2 million. And before you think about shredding evidence, copies are already with the IRS, the SEC, and Channel 7 News." The room went stone silent. A room full of people who had built their lives on power, suddenly powerless. Mr. Harlan's jaw tightened. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. You expect anyone to believe a janitor over my entire executive team? That word, janitor, hung in the air like a slap. Ruth leaned forward, her eyes sharp enough to cut through the smoke of denial. Funny you should mention belief, she said, because the truth doesn't need belief. It just needs daylight. The CFO jumped in, panicked. This is blackmail. No, Ruth shot back, her tone slicing through his protest. This is justice, something you've all been allergic to for years. The younger executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others glared at Ruth as if she were a trespasser who dared to upset their empire. And then came the moment, the one she had replayed in her head 100 times. Harlan slammed his palm on the table. Enough! Do you think anyone will take you seriously? Look at you. You don't belong here! The words were meant to crush her. Instead, they lit a fire. Ruth straightened, her voice rising, clear and unwavering. Don't I? I scrubbed these floors while you cooked the books. I emptied trash while you stuffed your pockets. I've been in this room longer than half your executives, and today, I'm the only one with the guts to tell the truth. So don't talk to me about belonging. The silence was deafening. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to hesitate. Ruth gathered her papers, her napkin, her courage. And with the eyes of every stunned executive on her, she turned to leave. At the door, she paused. Looked back once more. By the way, she said quietly, janitors see everything. And just like that, the most invisible person in the company became the most powerful. The moment she stepped out of that boardroom, the empire those men had built on lies began to crumble. Phones would start ringing, lawyers would start sweating, reporters would start circling. But Ruth, for the first time in years, she could finally breathe. Dear audience, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps. Ruth didn't wait around to see the empire crumble. She walked out of that glass tower with nothing but her envelope, her napkin, and a spine that no one could bend anymore. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about surviving the day. She was thinking about shaping tomorrow. The company tried damage control. Lawyers scrambled, executives panicked, and suddenly the same boardroom that mocked her was begging her to sit down and talk. They offered her hush money. They offered her a position in ethics compliance. They even tried to flatter her with a corner office. She smiled politely. Then she said no, because Ruth wasn't here to be bought. She was here to build. With the whistleblower settlement and the media spotlight, Ruth had choices, real choices, the kind she never thought she'd live to see. She rented a tiny co-working space downtown, set up an old laptop, and started what she once only dreamed of, her own forensic consulting firm. It wasn't glamorous. The first few weeks were just her and a whiteboard filled with messy notes. But for the first time, she wasn't cleaning up someone else's mess. She was building her own future. And here's the twist. Clients came faster than she expected. At first, small nonprofits and struggling startups called, desperate for someone honest to look at their books. But word spread. Her sharp eyes, her no-nonsense honesty, her refusal to play politics, it all caught attention. Within a year, Ruth's clients included Fortune 500 companies who once would have laughed at the idea of hiring a janitor. She didn't forget where she came from. Ruth launched a training program for single mothers, teaching them bookkeeping and basic accounting. Numbers don't lie, she'd tell them. And neither should you. Women who once stood in food pantry lines now stood in conference rooms with confidence, holding clipboards instead of overdue bills. Her son Daniel watched it all. The boy who once fell asleep to the sound of his mother's mop now fell asleep to the clacking of her laptop. His health stabilized, his grades soared, and one day he told her he wanted to study economics. So no one can ever lie to families like they lied to us. Ruth's eyes watered, but she didn't cry. She simply hugged him and whispered, "Make the world better than you found it." Ruth's life didn't turn into a Hollywood fantasy. She didn't buy mansions or flashy cars. She still preferred simple meals at home, quiet evenings with her son, and morning walks through her neighborhood. But there was one change that even she couldn't ignore. When Ruth walked into a room now, people looked up. They didn't see a cleaner or a charity case or a background character in someone else's story. They saw a woman who stood up, who refused to be invisible, who reminded the world that integrity still had a voice. Her past scars never vanished. She still remembered the nights of hunger, the humiliation of eviction notices, the sting of being dismissed. But those scars became her armor, proof that she survived what should have broken her, and in quiet moments, when the world finally slowed down, Ruth would sit at her desk, pull out that old napkin, and smile. Not because of the numbers, not because of the money, but because that napkin was a reminder. One small act of courage can shake the tallest towers. So what changed? Everything. Ruth was no longer invisible. She was undeniable. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories every week. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Ruth's shoes? They once called her just a cleaner. But the truth? Ruth had been cleaning up long before anyone noticed. Not just offices, not just conference rooms. She was cleaning up financial messes others created, cleaning up after broken promises, cleaning up after a world that kept telling her she didn't belong. Her story isn't just about numbers. It's about dignity, about refusing to let the labels others slap on you define who you are, because Ruth wasn't invisible. She was simply overlooked. And sometimes, the overlooked are the ones carrying the strongest light. Think about it. How many people do we walk past every day without noticing? The cafeteria worker, the janitor, the cashier with tired eyes. How many of them are holding brilliance, courage, or untold stories inside? How many of them are quietly holding up the world while the rest of us look the other way? Ruth proved that one act of courage can turn whispers into headlines and silence into strength. She didn't just save herself, she opened doors for others. Women she trained went on to land stable jobs, send their kids to college, and break cycles of poverty. One even wrote her a letter saying, "Because of you, my daughter will never know hunger the way I did." That's Ruth's real legacy. Not the money, not the headlines, but the ripple effect. Proof that the quietest person in the room might be the one who changes it forever. And here's the twist. A few years later, Ruth received a national award for ethics in business. Standing on that stage, holding a plaque bigger than the degree she once hung on her wall, she smiled. Not for the cameras, but for the little boy who once believed his mom was broken. He was in the front row, clapping the loudest. So the next time you sit at a table and underestimate the person serving you, remember Ruth. The mop didn't define her. Her courage did, because sometimes the people the world tries hardest to erase end up writing the boldest chapters. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories and new videos. And tell us in the comments, what hidden strength have you or someone you love used to rise when no one expected it?